What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are replacing a fuse box for a Subaru BRZ. So for those of you who don't know, I am actually engine swapping my Subaru BRZ with a turbo Honda K24. So what we're going to be focusing on today is replacing this fuse box. And as you can see, this thing is completely blown out. This is all supposed to be covered with one, big sort of plastic outer housing. And this thing is fully blown out. And so if you need to replace your fuse box for any reason and change it from this to this, then stick around. Let's get to it. So at this point, I'm working on all of the wiring, and I've kind of known from the beginning that I was going to need to replace this fuse box just because of how crap it looks. When I bought this car, originally it was a salvage title, and so, salvage title, and then it was rebuilt. The accident that it was in was on this front passenger side, and basically the whole fuse box, like all of the electronics, all of the fuses, and all of the wiring all works. This car did run for about a year and a half before I destroyed it. But I knew that, with putting all of the time and money and investment into making this engine bay look good with this brand new engine, I knew that I was gonna want to replace this as well because it looks like garbage. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it. So one of the major components of this is that there are normally, under normal circumstances, if this isn't completely destroyed already, there's normally 3 different mounting brackets that go onto the side of your fuse box. One here on the corner that bolts in here with a 10mm bolt, one on the side here that bolts in with this 10mm bolt, and one would normally be on the bottom that bolts in to a 10mm bolt right here. As you can tell, this is completely free. It was basically just zip tied all together and held onto this little opening right there. So I knew that, if I'm gonna spend all this time and money to make this thing look super nice, I don't want this to be held on with zip ties and have like all this exposed wiring just looking like trash. So for the sake of demonstration, I'm actually going to go over to the other fuse box that I've gotten to replace this one and use that to show you guys how you would normally remove this entire sort of board that holds all of your fuses in place and all the wiring connects from underneath. Remove that from the external housing. It'll just be a little bit easier to do over here instead of directly above it. All right, so here is the fuse box replacement that I bought off of eBay. Everything that we talk about here is going to be the exact same as on the car. So if you're doing this on the car, it all lines up. So the hardware you're gonna need for the fuse box is just a couple of flatheads, 2, maybe 3, but you wanna make sure that the tips are rather narrow because some of the slots to get at the clips in here are rather, small. So if you have a flathead with a really wide sort of tip on it, it's gonna make it difficult to be able to get all the way down in there and prop those kind of clips out. And then of course, you're gonna need a 10mm either socket or a wrench in order to get the 3 mounting bolts for the car to be able to pull that one out and drop this one in. So let's talk about all of the different clips and really sort of the procedure about how to go about removing this thing. All right, so when you're looking sort of top down at this when it's mounted in the car, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is try to remove this top little flat piece. And what this does is it just sort of sandwiches the top half of this onto the main wiring harness body. And so the way to do that is, if you can look, it's a little bit dark, but there are 2 clips, one right here on this left side and one in here, right in here on the right side. And so you're gonna basically need to have 2 flathead screwdrivers, one going in this way and pulling outward. So you basically slide this in towards the top of this opening, get behind the clip and push up this way. And let me see if I can get you guys to hear this clip. Yeah, so there's a clip in here on the right, and then a clip in this little sort of square gap here on the left. Again, it's a little bit hard to see, a little bit dark, but trust me, there's a little clip in here, and once you pry this one up and this one up at the same time with two different screwdrivers, two different flatheads, it will let go of the inner sort of retainers inside of here. So then that will allow you to slide this piece up and out. And now you have a gap here that whenever you go to try and actually lift up on the sort of circuit board, if you will, you'll have something to be able to sort of pry up on to try and get this thing out of there. Now, the second thing you're going to want to do is very similar, but over here on the side, there is this sort of slide cover that prevents your alternator wiring from sort of slipping out. There's a gap underneath this. And very similarly, this one's a little bit easier to see now. There's a gap here, and there's a gap there. Slide your two flatheads in here, push up to try and get those clips out with both of those flatheads at the same time. So pull, go scoop in towards the top and lift this upwards, and you'll be able to get those two clips to come off. And while you're doing that, there's a little ledge on the back here you can use to pry this forward, up, and off. And now you can kind of see another big opening on this side that whenever you start to go around and do all of these clips, you can have something to push up against, as opposed to if you kept those two pieces on there, you basically just sort of be pulling at the side of this, which is obviously much more difficult. And so now with those two pieces out of the way, unfortunately there isn't a piece on the back side here to help you lift this half. There's really only this opening and this opening, but you'll find that you should more or less be able to make it work once you get these sort of clips popped out. And so around the body of this, in order to remove your sort of circuit board, there are 6 different clips that go all the way around that obviously need to be popped so that this can come out. The first one is going to be right here on this corner next to your sort of main wiring harness, next to this big red fuse. Now again, this is, all of these clips work very similarly. So you'll take your flathead, scoop up towards the top, get in under that clip, and lift up to try and take the tension off of it. It just popped there. You can kind of hear that light. Yeah, so you can hear the clip in there. So there's one there. You've got another one here on the side next to this first large black fuse. Your third clip is going to be right next to this third large black fuse right here. What I found the easiest to do is to get a screwdriver, a flathead in this top one, lift up, as well at the exact same time having another second flathead in this gap, and then once you have those two pins sort of unclipped, you can apply pressure to the bottom and you can get these two up past the retainer that the clips go into. And so then at that point you have the tension off of this whole top corner. Now like we said, we have the third clip that goes in right here. So once you have those first two out, you can get this clip undone and continue to try and push up. The fourth one is going to be right in this little gap, sort of in between, or right on this middle fuse that's in between these group of 3. And then on this corner, you've got one right here on the side, all the way over here on the edge, as well as one clip right here. So this corner basically has 2 different clips to it, one here and one there. And this is the side that's kind of difficult because there's really no way to lift up on this. So as I was doing this, once I got my screwdrivers, my flatheads down in here, I was just kind of pulling this not really straight up. You can kind of grab this little section here because it's all plastic. This is not like a fuse that's going to pull out. You can grab that and try and lift up a little bit while those 2 clips are undone. And then finally, and this actually may be easier to do than these 2 clips and the one on the side, because of the fact that you created this opening by removing that flat piece on the side here. This is the 7th and final clip. So realistically, the order I would try to do this is try and unclip this guy and this guy, try and get this corner lifted up, and then come over here, try and get this number 3, and while that clip is off, you can reach under here and press up. So you're trying to get this whole side lifted just slightly past the retainers. Come over here, do number 4 because of the fact that you've already got this corner lifted. That should be a little bit easier to do. And then 5 here on the bottom, and 6 and 7 are going to be a little bit tricky, but use the plastic bits. Obviously try not to pull on the fuses, but try to use the black plastic bits to try and grab onto right here and pull up while you have that clip popped out. And now at this point, once you've kind of lifted it just enough to where all of the clips are past the retainers on the sides, now you should more or less be able to lift this guy straight up out of here. Obviously you're gonna have to deal with the wiring that's over here. You've got to get it, either try and push it straight up in this little channel that it like lives in, or you can try to lightly pull outwards and squeeze this whole wiring up out of there, just so that it's not getting bound up inside of this. So once you've done that, you should more or less be able to lift this whole inner housing out of the body. There we go. Okay, move this guy out of the way. And this is exactly why I only wanted to try to replace the box and not try to replace the entire thing, because I am not trying to solder all of those different wires together. Yeah, F all that noise. The circuit board inside the car all functions kind of like I said earlier. And now if you're like me, where you're just sort of replacing the external housing, you will have just done all of those steps for this to be able to pull this out and get this crappy piece of garbage pulled out from underneath it. But then you're gonna have to do it a second time. Like I did it on that used box originally, just to sort of learn, and then I came in here, pulled this one out. So this is pretty much free. All we really need to do is get this guy lifted up, get the new box sort of underneath it, drop it down, clip it all back together, and you should be pretty much good to go. Once you more or less kind of get it into place, sort of make sure that you press down on the spots where all of those clip locations were until you hear them snap in place. So now that we've more or less kind of got it fitted, you want to make sure that this guy is routed through this channel, so you can kind of gently try to pull these two sides out a little bit as you try to squeeze that in through there. Should fit pretty snug. There we go. So now we can kind of get our bolt hole positions. The bottom one, the one up top here, and then the one for our corner piece. So now that we've got the main box mounted, we need to put our two other pieces back on here. So I'm going to set this one off to the side, and we're going to focus on this guy that's going to go on top of our main wiring harness. Push down until it clips in. And so now over here on the side, we've got our other flat piece, and same sort of type of deal. And so now that is going to be pressing down and pressing in on the rest of your wiring here. So just try to make sure that that's not too snug. You don't want that to be super cramped or anything. There you go. Dropped down, clipped into place, and that is looking significantly improved. And so now you can take your new cover. You've got two openings right here to match two clips on this backside, so you just loop those in there through together, and then you've got your push tab up top that comes over the top, down, clips into place, and oh Billy, does that look so much better. Man, let me tell you, this has been the plague of all of my thoughts for so long, just because of how all this exposed wiring was right here. It was all chipped and cracked on this side. Like, that is just gonna look so much better for the cost of, what, $100 for the used box that I bought off of eBay, and some elbow grease, just getting in there with some flat heads and undoing a bunch of clips. Like, Super happy with how that turned out. And that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this sort of tutorial, install, whatever. I do want to give kind of a quick little update on how the rest of the project is going for all of those who are interested in following the engine swap series. So I have my custom aluminum drive shaft made by Driveline Services of North Atlanta, and this thing is a beaut. If y'all need a drive shaft, make sure to hit up Driveline Services. They will get you hooked up. So apart from that, I also needed to get some spacers custom made for my transmission mount because the TF Works trans mount doesn't fit. It really sucks when you buy a part that says, especially for anything that's engine swap related, if it says it's meant for this engine and that transmission in this car, it's like, okay, well they did their R&D. They know what they're talking about. Doesn't fit. It's like over an inch off on both sides compared to the tunnel underneath. I'll show you guys all of this in the next video when we finally get all of the back end stuff wrapped up. But after that, pretty much everything on the back half of the car will be done. What I need to do now, and what I've been kind of working on doing, is all of the wiring. And this is kind of part of the wiring, but it's more of an aesthetic thing. But connecting all of your different sensors, your alternators, all of your accessories over here, water pump, AC, all that stuff. I need to get the AC hooked up because that's kind of a separate system. But wiring and sensors, radiator back in, and coolant lines, which I have both of the coolant lines, but I gotta kind of chop them up to get them to fit everything. The new ECU, the Haltech Elite 1500, which obviously is kind of part of the wiring, so we'll call that 1.5. I need to get my turbo downpipe and my intercooler piping done, and I need to make a bracket for the intercooler to mount here at the front. And after that, it's, get the front bumper put back on here, get all your headlights and all the rest of the little front sensors up here clipped up, load up the bass tune on the new ECU, crank this baby up, and see if we can get it to run. I forgot to talk about fueling. Fueling is the fuel lines with the fuel rail and the injectors, all that kind of goes in there too. And I might have something coming for the top of this engine here pretty soon as well. Stay tuned for that. But we are like 3 or 4 steps away from having our first startup. And once we get that first startup in, man, we're cooking. It's, get the wheels put back on it, drop it down, send it off to the tuner, and we might just be in business. But that's gonna wrap it up for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and if you found this install/replacement helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on the build and all the new content. And until next time, build your dreams.